hunger that derives anger to the point where you have not eaten and it has come to affect your emotions and clarity. And it was at that moment he supplied in my hand several notes of ready paper money and directed me that down the street was a publican run by a man by the name of MacDonald, if I understand correctly,
Hmm.
titled quite simply McDonald's. That apparently has done very well, and he has come to open several of the same restaurants. Mr. Austin called it, I believe, a chain. And so I walked. I walked through the summer heats. I bid good day to the people that I came across who paid me no mind and looked askance very sternly at me. And it was at that moment that upon walking to the store, I noticed several motor carriages wrapped round the building. I thought it a strange thing, wondering if perhaps a coachman sat waiting on the other end to collect them and park them, that the purveyors might go inside and find lodging. To my surprise, in joining the line, a box began to speak to me, and in this box, a person asking specifically for my orders. Well, I came with no letter of introduction, and so I asked for clarity. They very impatiently asked what I wished to eat. I was astounded, Mr. Loftus. And so there, next to the box, sat precisely a menu of daily diet for the offerings of this publican. I asked to speak to Mr. McDonald, and they said to stop. I was entirely put askance. So I requested at that moment what looked readily available, which first came to eye, and they gave precisely what the amount would be, and I was wholly perplexed. When I turned round the corner, I realized quickly what was happening. These motor coaches were not waiting for a coachman to take tack and horse, but rather instead were distributing the food that had been ordered in the box. I began to understand why people were looking so strangely at me. As I sat in pediment, standing in this line, people began to honk at horn, and I collected my affairs, and for a princely sum, collected a lunch that, in my opinion, was not worth the gargantuan sum. A bottle or a bowl of arrack can be acquired for 12 shillings in 1774, but in this day and age, one cannot have a quarter pound and cheese for more than, well, a
I,
our year's wages of a princeman's salary.
I,
But I still was amazed by the convenience of this. And while I, again, could never meet the acquaintance of Mr. MacDonald to congratulate him on his ingenious scheme, I do wonder if there is something there. And it was confirmed when, upon the sign and postage of that particular publican's establishment, he said over 1 billion served. Now, I know not if that means quarter pounders or Big Macs, as he calls his signature culinary offering, but there is something to it. Let it be known, modern America.
I think our guests that are joining us are getting a twofer here, and they're getting your initial reaction to the miracle and wonders of fast food. I'm happy that McDonald's was your first experience because it is the quintessential fast food. That's what. So you receive your food quickly. That's the idea of the line, right? You show up, you give your order, and within a cup 2 to 3 minutes, you have your food ready to go. Now, don't ask them to explain how the food is ready so quickly. I don't think that you'll be particularly appetized by the realities of how that occurs.
I suppose on some occasions the better virtue is in not knowing
There's a
how the
reason
sausage
that,
is made.
yeah, there's no windows into the kitchen
Hmm.
from the outside. But for those just joining us and listening to the doctor's experience at a McDonald's drive-through, welcome, welcome, welcome. I am Isaac Loftus, the co-host of Too Complicated for History, and this is the Primary Source Media YouTube channel where we have a very special regular guest with us today. It is the Dr. Ben Franklin, the one and only, the real man in the flesh, here to regale us with his thoughts about our world. Not the world that he came with, some context of like the world that he came from and what he thinks of what we've got going on.
Good morning,
Today,
Internet.
yeah, yes. Welcome, Dr. Franklin.
Good morning, America.
And so today, I know that you, sir, have been had an interesting experience because you've been working to educate some youths recently.
I have. I have. It is ever been my desire since reemerging in this modern world. To share history in new, enlightening ways, to empathetically connect the present with the past. And one of the ways in which I go about exercising this is visiting schools. I have, in the course of my tenure of doing this work, visited schools across the wide expanse of the American empire, sharing American history, sharing stories, and cultivating in the youth not only a love of history, but a love of themselves and their futures. One particular instance in one of these schools, wherein I've had prolonged exposure to the youth, was an acquaintance of modern vernacular. Now, I'm a lover of language, Mr. Loftus. That is prolifically known about me, not only in the words that I have written over the course of my life, but also the words that I have borrowed from great
Hmm.
writers like Swift and Seneca and Defoe. And well, we sit in an interesting time, an interesting week. We at present are on the second day of July, which is a prolific day for American history.
It
The
is.
day the Lee Resolution was voted, our true Independence Day, wherein we were independent states, but with no national statement. It was this day that compelled John Adams to offer that the 2nd of July would ever be celebrated with fireworks and fetes and days of reflection. But of course, we celebrate 2 days from now on the 4th, the day our Declaration of Independence was adopted. Now, I was on the committee of five to draft that document, and as we all know, the primary labor fell to Mr. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. It was decided it would be far more expeditious to have one person write and five edit
Hmm.
than five write and five edit. And so the work fell to Jefferson. Now, because of this week, I pay particular attention to the words we choose. And so on this particular visit, a statement was made by one of the children wherein they professed, Dr. Franklin, you're so Sigma. It gave me pause.
Hmm.
Now, we know the Greek alphabet. We are familiar with the alpha and the omega, but Sigma, something fixed right betwixt the alphabet, it gave me pause. And much like the comment my secretary, Mr. Austin, made,
Oh, I think we may have lost Dr. Franklin. Interesting, interesting, interesting. All right. Well, I am going to have my producer Pat see if he can recover our connection with Dr. Franklin through the wormhole of the internet, but I'll attempt to entertain you folks in the interim. Um, but uh, one of the things that we've got coming up for with our partnership with Dr. Franklin himself is on the 4th itself. If you go to his Instagram, which is Be Frank Live, he will be doing a live reading of the Declaration of Independence. I don't know how many of you have seen or read the entire thing, but it's worth checking out. And some coming from someone who actually understands the words that are being spoken, it is probably a relatively helpful thing. And given how the holiday is mostly celebrated with barbecues and fireworks, like and parties and all that kind of stuff, it sometimes is nice to be able to take pause and look back at the actual pun intended primary source, the reason that the holiday exists. So interestingly enough, there's some cool stuff. I'm gonna. Oh, we may have recovered Dr. Franklin. Is he here? He is here. He is back. Hold on. I'm getting word that he is reconnected, and we're gonna jump back into our conversation about a child calling him Sigma. Uh,
heard,
you can be heard,
can I be
sir.
seen?
You can
Very
be
good.
seen. Don't worry. I was just telling the audience watching about your live reading of the Declaration that's going to take place later this week.
Yes. My hope is upon the day, time still to be determined, but somewhere in the window of 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, live upon my Instagram, B Franklin Live, there will be a reading of the Declaration of Independence, dramatically read by yours truly. Sincerest apologies. As I was saying, I was it was given great pause, and I wondered in that instance if I had been rendered some insult, and so I asked for clarification. What is
This is
this
being called Sigma. Just to
being called Sigma?
Okay.
Being called Sigma, Dr. Franklin, you're so Sigma. And attached with it was several other observations and questions. Above all, Dr. Franklin, are you skibbity? Do you have skibbity riz? No cap, and all of it was so alien to me. Now, I am a creature very familiar with 18th century slang. Upon more than one occasion, I've been called an overreaching bed presser for my excessive weight. A bed presser is a term for someone who has achieved a certain corpulence in their life. Uh,
Okay. I think I'm picking up what you're putting down.
many times I've left a tavern with a head full of bees, various slangs for the consumption of alcohol.
Sure.
So I am no stranger to vernacular fixed to a specific time, but I was overwhelmed and very nearly, Mr. Loftus, stopped my lessons for the day simply to acquaint myself with the slang of the time. And so I thought it made good meat for one of these videos. You, being a creature of the modern world, I, a creature acclimating to the modern world, but being fixed in the 18th century times into which I was bred. I thought it a perfect opportunity to bridge the gap and react to the terms that we hear today. What the kids are saying.
What the kids
Uh,
are saying. I think that's a great idea. I mean, you threw out a couple. Was it called? So just for clarification, there, this is. I feel as if because I live in my I guess everyone lives in the time in which that they live, but because I live now, I feel like slang is a modern conception. But you're telling me that slang was a very common thing. Phrases that even in your time.
oh, particularly,
Hmm.
particularly, and slang consistently changed. Not only, I was born at the beginning of the 18th century. By the century's end, new slang had been adopted and was coming into place. Um, but even in the oaths that were shared of the time, mild oaths to uh, more prodigious ones. For instance, are you familiar with the word zoons?
Zunes. No,
Zoons.
I am not.
Z- Zoons is an oath, a curse, a profession. Um, uh,
Okay.
I guess what you would call in your times a swear word.
Hmm. Zune.
Zunes, uh, all equating also to things like splud, another swear word. Now, do you know where the
Splud.
con splud? It sounds strange, I assure you. It will make sense to you in a moment.
I feel like that was a soda from the 90s,
Splud,
1990s.
coming summer of 2024, Dr. Franklin presents splud.
Blood.
If you were to go by an 18th century palate, it would very likely be like an oyster soda.
Oh my
Oyster was a
god.
prodigiously favored flavor of ice cream.
I
So
can't think of something less bussin'. Just to,
bussin', another thing the children said. Funny you should mention that. Another word, bussin'.
Okay.
Uh, so splud and zoons came specifically for an abbreviate of God's wounds or God's blood. Now, the
Okay.
reason this curse was abbreviated was because you were inherently using the Lord's name in vain against one of God's
Hmm.
commandments. So zoons was a way to take the particular damnation out of it and incorporate the sentiment. Another thing that you hear in my time is huzzah. Now we know the modern derivative of that is hooray,
Hmm.
um, but huzzah is another conjunctive of his honor,
Okay. Oh, his
specifically
honor.
the king's honor.
Hmm.
Huzzah. Uh,
Interesting.
hooray is the French derivative to that, or hurrah, the Latin derived
Oh,
of king. Uh, it's a it's a cheer or expletive in honor of the monarch.
that's. I would never have guessed that was. It feels very removed from that because it's a cheer. But we today don't cheer our rulers in the same way. So I guess that makes sense why I have a hard time making that connection. Um, but I guess it's something that you would have done, or people in your time would have done pretty regularly. Interesting. Interesting. So I'm curious. So what were the out of the several pieces of slang? Did the children give you any insight as to what these things meant,
You
or
know what was fascinating was I asked for explanation on the word skibbity
okay?
because it was very unclear to me whether skibbity was a good thing or a bad thing. And one of them, with great courage, said, "No one knows.
Huh.
No one knows." And I began to sit and wonder, being the philosopher that I am, if the generation of words and slangs, uh, in its offering, in its um, spread, in its eventual acceptance of language, does the meaning come first and the word to solidify it, or the word itself, Mr. Loftus, followed by a grace period where meaning is subjective until, by general consensus, it is solidified?
Huh. That is an interesting question. Now, I'm curious if getting to the root of the source, like I'm sure the child didn't identify the kid that you were teaching couldn't identify the meaning, but I'm curious because I do know what the source of this, like where this word originated from, and I'm curious if maybe we took a look at that, if it might help you parse out some
Oh,
understanding. Because
I would be amenable.
all right, now forgive me, audience, while I resize some stuff because I do have to share my screen here. So I got to reorganize what I'm doing, and you will see a window briefly in that has our Zoom call with our producer Pat's name here. But feel free to ignore that. I'm just gonna while I adjust everything that I'm doing here. But yeah, I think if we get to the root of this, we can maybe have some idea of what we're doing. Oh, it won't even let me share my screen. That's super irritating.
Skibbity toilet.
Yes, yes, sir. Hold on. This is not letting me do because it's blacking out that frame. Interesting.
I can see it fairly well.
You can see it fairly well, but the audience can't.
Oh, I
And I
see.
would like them to be able to see this with me. Now I'm curious how I can make this work for them, but we might have to. They might just have to listen, and in the VOD of this, we can go and put the. I'll overlay the video for the time being because I know that I can. If you can see it, then we can go with that. All right, I'll share this screen with Dr. Franklin. Or here, you know what? I'm just gonna pull it up, and we can.
I feel strangely in this moment like the Moses of memes. You're
Yeah,
presenting to me the burning bush that I must then go back to the people and describe.
you must.
This
Yeah.
is wondrous and
So I just
possibly slightly blasphemous.
we'll have to figure this like the technical way to do this later because I'm not able to figure this out. Obviously, I am a wonderfully knowledgeable live streaming uh, uh, technician here.
To
But
give you comfort, sir, you know more than Ben Franklin about live streaming.
I'm not sure that gives me comfort, given you are. How old are you at this point? 200 and.
Add another century.
It's 300 and some odd years old. So I just sent you a hyperlink via our Slack channel. So feel free to take a look at it. It's only 60 seconds long. And for the audience listening, what the doctor is going to be looking at this moment is Skibbity Toilet Season 1 full screen.
The thumbnail was horrifying.
Yeah.
Oh, very well. America, I do this for you. That's horrifying. This. Let us begin.
So I just dropped the link in the chat for anyone who is watching and wants to watch along.
Huh. The Nothing could have prepared me for that.
Now, here's my question. Did that help your understanding at all?
That video could do nothing but hurt. I feel cursed. I feel cursed, Mr. Loftus. I feel cursed. What I just witnessed, I uh I witnessed a basin of porcelain into which a man's head appeared, making direct eye contact with me before ascending from the porcelain basin and giving me a great fright. It, that's where Skibbity comes from.
This is where Skibbity comes from. This is, and here I'm pulling up an image here for the audience to see. It is this a particular word comes from a series of I don't remember whether they were YouTube or TikTok videos of short videos that were made last year called Skibbity Toilet, which you can find online if you Google Skibbity Skibidi. But yeah, so this is what we're talking about. This is the video that the doctor just watched.
I
Unfortunately,
I hate that. I hate that you did this to me. I think just as all good and bad of history came from the temptation of Eve, I feel you, like the serpent in the Garden of Eden, have presented with me knowledge that I did not want to have, and I will never be the same.
So since they used the word skibbity, in what context did the kids use it? I'm curious.
I, I think I think I think I don't know. I think I don't know. So
He's at a
someone
loss
said
for
something.
words.
Yeah, someone said something about the it was partnered with another word that moves quite a bit, which is Riz, which
Oh, so
is
someone
to
said you had
my
the skibbity riz.
somebody said I had the Skibbity Riz.
Hmm.
Now Riz, I've come to understand, is another word for charisma, because I have, in my time upon the internet, been commented and complimented not only upon my Riz, but even called and coined by one person on TikTok the French Rizzler,
Oh,
which
that's
I
pretty
think
good.
quite the eponym and pen name.
Yeah.
But to be Skibbity, Skibbity Riz, if Skibbity is indeed good, which I cannot fathom that it can be after witnessing that, uh, would denote that you are curtailed in your charisma. You have Skibbity Riz that is withheld. Someone said something about someone who is married having Skibbity Riz. Now, does that mean you are restrained in your Riz? Or is Skibbity Riz an adjective to complement the possession of a noun? Skibbity Riz in excess. I would be eager to hear people's comments in this discourse as to what it means to be in possession of Skibbity Riz.
I'd be very curious too, because as you can't see the live stream, but currently in between us is a screenshot of the skibbity toilet. Um, so giving context to everything that you're sort of trying to work through mentally, I don't know. I'd be curious to hear the discourse too. It is one of those things that what are these videos about? I'm not sure. What does the word really mean? I don't know. I agree with the child that
I think it a fascinating thing, and leads me in my own time, for slang of my time. Did someone uh, look at a person with excessively thin legs and say, "Look at those cat sticks," and then it became synonymous with thin legs are called cat sticks?
Explain to me Thin legs are called cat sticks.
Yes, yes. Why? Why does that slang exist? And what made a person draw the parallel to utilize that particular
We,
felicity
we,
of expression?
we call them chicken legs in our day, and it's
Chicken legs.
which I feel
Um,
makes a little bit more sense.
you know, strong liquor was referred to as knockdown.
Knockdown. That makes sense to me. That is relatively, you know.
If you have uh, a slang for a wife was a load of mischief.
That's kind of funny. I feel like that's actually less insulting than some of the ones that are more modern.
Mhm.
Um,
There is something I understand oftentimes we have to exercise a particular replacement of a word of unalive to be synonymous with a particular word that for some reason, as I understand it, the internet does not
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
enjoy. But one profession that I've heard over the course of it was I'm unalived to replace it with the other word.
Huh.
But in my time, in avoidance of that particular word, we would say fall off a perch.
I fell off a perch.
I fell off a perch,
Or
which I think is quite
I
quite
followed
nice.
off a perch. Yeah, it's very Humpty Dumpty, and it's I don't know if that actually that probably is more recent than after your time too.
Is it?
Uh,
Are you about to show me another scary video?
no, no. Unfortunately, I want to say because I really liked that. I'm going to save that for when I can successfully share my screen with the audience, so that they can all experience. We can all experience this together. We'll have to save it
I
for
would.
next time.
I hated experiencing it alone. So
Yeah, it must have felt very isolating. We'll make a reel out of it of your reactions because it was priceless. I'll tell you that. Humpty Dumpty is a children's nursery rhyme about an egg that falls off a wall and then has to but then can't be put back together by all the king's horses and all the king's men. That's the thing. But he fell off the egg falls off a perch and falls off a perch.
so is it an allegory for the hardships of monarchy then, of
Um,
how kings neglect their subjects?
Either that or just a way to tell children to be careful with eggs. When they're one or the other.
It's always good when you can utilize one story for multiple ends.
For multiple things. I have made the mistake of giving my 18-month-old son an egg to hold.
Hmm.
They're hard to squeeze to crack. I was like, oh, he's not gonna be able to squeeze it. His arms aren't that strong, but very easy to break when you drop them. And they look like a ball. So it didn't last very long.
This has been an advertisement for eggs.
Yeah, this is an advertisement for eggs. See, whoever's making eggs these days, make them with harder shells. I don't know. But that's an interesting. I think you might be right in that someone just sees something and says something, and then it catches on. Because why this particular video sparked Riz, I think, predates in its usage these videos, the Skibbity Toilet videos, but it was added on after Skibbity became part of the vernacular. And why those things catch on, who knows? Maybe it's because Skibbity is fun to say.
Another word that has come to mean something different from my time, even perhaps in your time, that has been added on and has come back in relevance. So if something was so beyond the grasp of what we contemplated in our time, both in the majesty of it or in the terror of it, we would say it was awesome.
Awesome.
Meaning a full revelation of awe inspiring.
Okay.
We speak of the awesome power of the Almighty. But it was not a profession of something being necessarily good. And somewhere in the past 300 years, awesome has come to be an exclamation of something good. Even in the most mundane of terms, I might profess that my experience of traveling to Mr. McDonald's Publican was awesome. Now, it has been added to amongst the youths of today that not only is something awesome, but a particular bouillabaisse has been derived from it and is awesome sauce. Now, I don't know if that means seasoning of the awesome or a distillation of the awesome,
Hmm.
but something is awesome sauce. And
Yeah, both of those ideas are interesting. I don't know what the answer to that question is.
no one does,
No one does.
apparently. No
Yeah.
one does. This is why we need you, Internet, to clarify these great mysteries that we are being presented with every week.
That's you know what's interesting? I think the word awe in and of itself has a positive connotation in our times today. Was that not the case for you at the time? Like the awe, it's in and of itself, like the idea of being in awe was is used exclusively now to express like overwhelmed with majesty.
I think we had a greater fear of the Almighty
Hmm.
in our time. Um, it led to superstitious practices, and again, this was the whole great challenge that I faced in my experiments of electricity, where people believed lightning was the ire of the Almighty and left in awe of its power.
Ah, interesting.
Um,
Speaking
and
of the Almighty, I do think there is something that has a slang term that has come into popular usage with kids now, which is probably definitely not the same phrasing, but I do think the use of the term "on God," I think is an interesting one in that you are invoking the Almighty in order to say I'm telling the truth. Like I am. Was there? I know that there are references, pretty significant or common references to the Almighty throughout writings and speakings in your time. But being truthful, is that one of the ways
you
that
know,
people?
it to me it seems to have there is a symmetry to it, only because of the devout desire to not perjure one's self.
Right.
So when you give testament or testimony in a court of law, you give certain oaths upon the Bible that you will tell the truth and will not perjure yourself
Yeah.
upon it. So the testament of on God s- seems to have a um, wonderful reflection to what has been implemented into what is
Yeah.
of I'm speaking truthfully, not perjuring myself, and I believe it so incredibly much that I will make statement that it is the truth. Um, Now I don't brings to mind another thing that I do not quite understand, which is cap, no cap.
Oh, cap. Cap. Yeah. Let me actually see if I can. Yeah. So it was. How did you come across that?
Well, one of the children professed a statement and then gave caveat no cap, and I asked specifically. It said that it meant that they were not deceiving.
Hmm.
Uh, Maybe similar to on God, but again a different expression of it.
Yeah, kind of. In a little, it's actually no cap is actually probably a derivative of the word capin, which would mean lying. So the like being distruthful, and it's actually that's an interesting thing in particular because I do know that that particular phrase comes from what we call African American Vernacular English (AAVE). So um, it's a phraseology and meaning and word and language that comes from a particular community within the United States and then spreads to in wider usage. I'm curious in your time, given that so many people were immigrating to the colonies from various places, if that was that there were similar regional and ethnic sort of groupings. I wouldn't be surprised if that was also the case. But this
I'm
is one.
certain that it were. I
Yeah.
think with the misfortune of my time, what survives
Mm,
of language as it pertains to Africans was harsh language implemented by whites to describe
right.
Africans, particularly in a condition of being enslaved. There was one of the pieces of vernacular that I was going to share with you that I immediately withheld because I realized very quickly it may have been pertaining to describing a situation of slavery
Yeah.
and racial
Interesting.
prejudice. So what survives therein of um, African slang being implemented into society, I think has always been there. For
Mm,
instance, our so much of our food, so much of our practices, so much of who we are came from those African roots, those African American roots, and then were implemented. The banjo of your time
mm.
came from the African banjar,
Oh,
and the
I didn't know
music
that.
the enslaved peoples made. So much of music came from those practices. The very notion of inoculation and modern vaccination came from an enslaved person of Cotton Mather,
Yes.
who then brought an African practice of how they prevent diseases.
Yeah.
And so the notes are certainly there. However, those keeping the records were incredibly biased, which is the importance and significance of oral history in the modern conversation.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and
but
I think being able to trace, it's one of the things that I know that people, not everyone, because a lot of people use these kinds of slangs, but there's certain in the record keeping of the slang, in particular when it comes to African American vernacular English, I know a lot of people are very careful to categorize things as such.
mm,
Right, and they say, "Hey, this is where this originates," and there's even people that don't use certain slang because if it is because it's you're sort of um, the word or the current word for it is the term that they use is appropriating, but it
mm.
potentially sort of taking from another culture in which that you do not necessarily understand and using it for your own purposes. Uh,
There is a larger conversation, and
for sure.
I try to put this practice forward in the work I do in history,
Hmm.
between how we choose words in describing the institution of human slavery, and one of which is deviating from the word slave and instead using the adjective as a noun in enslaved.
Right.
Slave being the complete summation of everything a person is versus enslaved, which is the condition in which they find themselves because of society. And I quite like that a lot. And oftentimes, in revisiting my primary sources, will choose that word in replacement for the other, for the purposes of greater empathy in conversation. Language is a powerful thing, no matter what time you find yourself in. The extraordinary thing about being in the present is you get to be a part of the greater conversation into how language is utilized. And in that, I find myself quite skibbity
Well,
about about the ability to live in these times. But maybe awesome sauce is the better word.
you know what? Who knows what the better word is, and as far as skibbity goes, because its origins, meaning, and full context is a mystery to us
I
and to all.
I thought perhaps we could do this today, but perhaps instead we should enlist the challenge to our listeners
Sure.
and read it next week. I had longed to see the preamble of the Declaration of Independence converted into modern slang.
Oh,
And what I would like as a challenge to our listeners is to take their hand at trying it and submitting it to us so that next week, on top of perhaps my reading of the Declaration of Independence on Thursday, we might do parallel readings of the two.
I think that is a great idea, and I would love for our community, your Junto, to help us make that a reality. That'd be very cool. I think that would be very funny, and very enlightening to a lot of people. But we should definitely do that. But I think it's a great place for us to end on. We've explored esoteric Gen Z, Gen A lingo, mulled on the complexities of skibbity, and, and contemplated the meaning of language overall. I think it was a good conversation. Well, I'm very pleased to have had it. Before we close everything, I just wanted to let everyone know that you should definitely follow the Doctor's. If you really enjoyed his thoughts, you should follow the Doctor's podcast. It's called Let's Be Frank. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, and video versions of that podcast are available on this very YouTube channel. So make sure you like and subscribe. And you're actually doing a revolutionized remastering of your season 1 right now. That's what just released. We had an episode release yesterday, I believe.
That's correct. That's correct.
Um,
So, my labor over the next several months is to take our first two seasons, which were all audio, and revisit some of those scripts with some of the practices we have now, some of
mm,
the more nuanced pieces of our show that I've learned in the year and a half that I've re-entered modern society. And I will be releasing those on Primary Source Media's YouTube channel exclusively. And so, if you have picked up Let's Be Frank before and have enjoyed it, this is a new way to enjoy that history. If you're picking it up for the first time, it's a chance to look back to some of those old episodes or view them for the first time as as we try to culminate into what this very strange business that we are engaged in is.
yeah, that's great. I'm very excited to see those new versions, those episodes given new life. The first episode that was released, your first episode ever of the podcast, was actually about piracy, which I was and your love of the sea, which I found as a fascinating listen.
There is a reason behind it. The first true published work that I ever submitted, it was for my brother James, to whom I was apprenticed, was a poem about the taking of Edward Teach the pirate, about the battle on Ocracoke Island. I wrote it as a young boy of 12,
Hmm.
and the sea has always fascinated me. It was one of the first true things I wished to do. And my father, recognizing my love for the sea, immediately found something else to occupy me, fearing that I would sail off, never to be seen again. But I made many transatlantic voyages over the course of my life. Spent many hours at the pacing of a deck of a ship, and as always, found ways to engage my mind, either in the invention of a sea lantern that would not be disturbed with the ebbing and flowing of the tides, the perfecting of the maritime trade and how one might sail with better expedition and efficiency, and even mapping the Gulf Stream, coming from the question of why does it take less time to go across the Atlantic in one direction than it does the
Hmm.
other? And using that as means to mark out and denote where the Gulf Stream are and the condition of the winds. The sea has always inspired and captivated me.
Interesting. So, if you want to hear more about that, go listen to the revolutionized season 1, episode 1 of Let's Be Frank, which is available on this YouTube channel. Again, make sure you like and subscribe. And this conversation was brought to you by Primary Sources Media supporters over on Patreon. And if you want to help us have more conversations like this, help us release more podcasts, do more videos, please go to patreon.com/primary source media to go check it out. There's content from all sorts of fun content, including blooper reels of myself and my co-hosts and co-producers attempting to do historical content and oftentimes failing. Thank goodness for the magic of editing. Or you get early access and some exclusive content, including signed book giveaways from a lot of the historians that we interview on Too Complicated for History. So if any of that intrigues you, please go to primarysourcemedia.com/Patreon to go check it out. And again, subscribe and go follow the Doctor's podcast, Let's Be Frank. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being here.
Good day, my friends. Always a privilege.
All right. See y'all.